So the government statistician addressing the press this morning, economist Dr. Doku OseiSako, they're joining me on Zoom to make sense of the latest numbers. Good afternoon to you, sir. So we expected inflation rate to go up. What is alarming, though, is the difference between April and May, a 4% increase. That is so alarming.
Yes, it is alarming, but you realize that it is lower than between March and April, because between March and April, the difference was 4.2%. That's year on year. And then month on month, it was 5%. But between April and May, it has reduced from 5% to 4.1% month on month. And then year on year, it has reduced from 4.2 to 4.0. So the rate of inflation rate, between the month of April and May, it has slowed down. However, the current inflation rate is still high. And then he also said that imported inflation is driving inflation in the country. We have food inflation also being higher than non-food inflation. So basically, the analysis always comes down to food inflation. And that is why it is important to concentrate on food if we are to solve this issue. The Bank of Ghana has been doing its bit by increasing the policy rate. But in fairness to the Bank of Ghana, they can only fight the demand side of inflation. As for the supply side of inflation, it goes beyond Bank of Ghana. It has to do with both the fiscal policies and the real economic growth of the country. And if we have to resolve inflation in the country, we need to attach more importance to the real sector, where we grow food and then where we also manufacture local goods. But you realize that it is not only about the imported. Even with the local production, inflation is high. Take a look at the PPI, the Producer Price Index. It is very high. What is it telling you? It is telling you that even if you ignore imported inflation and concentrate on local production, still prices of goods are still rising. So there's a whole lot. This requires holistic approach. And this is a worrying situation because, as we know, inflation erodes the value of your money. In other words, if you bought something for 100 cedis last year, you add 27.6 cedis more to buy the same item. If you reverse it and you look at inflation as a silent thief, as my professor would put it, now the thief is stealing 27.6% of our money. So every 100 cedis that you have in your pocket, 27.6 is gone, because the thief called the silent thief called inflation is stealing the value of our money. Now the thief is stealing 27.6 cedis of every 100 cedis in our pocket. This is an alarming situation. Ghana has the highest inflation in West Africa. We have to deal with it.
Wow. And I don't want to get into what the government should be doing because you have discussed this so many times. The central bank in a recent interview was confident that we would see the rate drop to single digit by next year. How would that happen, seeing that we are dealing with the same factors that are causing the spike? You note that between March and April, if you compare the rate of increase to this one, between April and May, there's a slight decline. Is that going to be the trend we are going to see towards the end of the year?
Well, I hope so, but a lot depends on what happens from the external sources. Remember that before COVID and before the war, Ghana was doing relatively well. Ghana was doing single-digit inflation. So we have still not recovered from the COVID-19 effect. And then we have also not recovered from the war. So a lot depends on when the Russian-Ukraine war is going to end. Even if the war ends today, it will take Ukraine more than 5 years to recover everything and to reposition their economy. So if you are fully dependent on Russia and Ukraine, and the war even ends today, it's going to take us about 5 years to get back to normal levels. So if you depend on somebody and the person is not able to help you, what do? You don't fold your arms and sit down. You have to do something for yourself internally. So the simple answer to your question is that it depends on the external factors, which have been the contributory factors driving inflation. But in addition to that, we have our own local problems. Even if you ignore the imported inflation, we have our own local problems. So to the extent that we can control inflation, we have to deal with the local, problems with respect to price of inputs, fertilizer inputs, inputs like fertilizer, the seedlings that we use for production, irrigation, storage, transportation. These are all part of the local problems that we face in the country. So we have to, first of all, hope that the war ends and then Russia or Ukraine recovers. And also we have to deal with the internal problems that we have in our economy with respect to food production and also other, sources of inflation. Because a typical example is the fuel prices. How are we going to resolve the fuel prices? So again, the fuel price, the crude oil price has shot up. The budget for this year was $62 per barrel. Today we are doing over $100 per barrel because of the war. So to the extent that the war will continue, I'm not sure we'll be able to deal with the inflation, but we have to start putting things in place now. We don't have to wait for anybody.
So the single-digit inflation is not cast in stone for next year, and until then, the thief inflation will continue to steal my 27.6% of 100 Ghana cedis. The ordinary person is bearing the brunt of inflation.
Yes. The ordinary person is bearing the brunt of inflation. Imagine if you bought something from the market last year, and on the average, you have to add 27 cedis more to buy the same item that you bought last year. But we must also disaggregate inflation. Remember that inflation is just the average. And you just mentioned that the regional distribution has upper east recording the lowest and eastern region recording the highest. So while some regions are feeling a bit okay, other regions are feeling the heavy hit. So in the same way, on the micro level or on the individual level, depending on the weight of the item that you buy, for somebody it could be fuel. So the inflation to individual A could be by 50%, depending on the items that you buy. Inflation for individual B could be 100%, depending on the items that you buy. And I'll give you a typical example. Last month, grapes was recorded 101% inflation, grapes, followed by diesel. So if you are somebody who likes grapes a lot and you buy grapes a lot, you realize that your inflation in your pocket is 100%. But another person who also pays crèche or kindergarten fees, which recorded a negative inflation, that person will be feeling okay. So inflation pressure in our pockets will differ from one person to the other, depending on the weight of the items that you buy. In other words, depending on the item that you consume most. Me, as I speak with you, the item that takes a greater part of my expenditure is fuel, because I go out and go to meetings a lot. To somebody, it could be tomatoes. To another person, it could be oranges. To another person, it could be grapes. To another person, it could be yam. Another person, it could be gas. So inflation, like I said, will differ from, at the individual level, will differ from one person to the other. While somebody may be recording even a negative inflation in his pocket, another person may be recording 100% inflation in his pocket.
I guess we just have to readjust. Thank you so much, Dr. Doku OseiSako, who is an economist, speaking to us on the latest inflation numbers. You are watching the marketplace. Still to come, how do we fix the current economic challenges? I'll have in studio Member of Parliament for Inshaisu in the Ashanti region, also a member of the Finance Committee of Parliament, Dr. Stephen Amwa. Stay tuned.